The rain fell in heavy sheets over Ouagadougou as the convoy of armored black land cruisers rolled toward the presidential compound, headlights cutting through the misty dawn. Inside the lead vehicle sat Colonel Amadou Keita, flanked by two heavily armed agents of the Special Forces unit, the infamous Unit Alpha 9, loyal not to the state but to foreign financiers and high-ranking elites embedded deep within the Transitional Council. Colonel Keita's eyes remained fixed on the encrypted tablet in his hands, where a flashing red directive simply read, Operation Stallion, detain Traoré, silence dissent, authorize full use of force. No trial, no explanation, just a silent political purge ordered by unseen hands far from the dusty streets of Burkina Faso. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the young revolutionary leader who had become a symbol of Pan-African resistance and sovereignty, was to be arrested before sunrise, charged with endangering national stability, a phrase that had become code for challenging the dominance of foreign economic interests. Meanwhile, unaware of the looming betrayal, Captain Traoré sat with his closest advisors in a dimly lit operations room beneath the old intelligence headquarters, reviewing satellite imagery of mining installations recently reacquired from a French conglomerate that had been siphoning off uranium under falsified contracts. "This is what sovereignty looks like," he muttered, tapping the map. "We take back what is ours." General Salif Bambay, his longtime ally, leaned forward, his grizzled face tense. "They won't let this go unpunished, Ibrahim. You've embarrassed the West, the IMF, and every puppet regime on the continent. They'll strike back." Ibrahim gave a thin, resolute smile. "Then we don't blink. We hold the line." Suddenly, the encrypted radio crackled. A panicked voice burst through. "Sir, we have unmarked vehicles moving toward the compound from the eastern checkpoint. Alpha 9 signatures confirmed. They're not responding to protocols." Silence fell across the room. Ibrahim stood slowly, his hand instinctively moving to the pistol at his waist. So it begins. At that moment, across the city, sleeper agents embedded in Traoré's administration began executing a synchronized betrayal. Communications blacked out in certain sectors. Loyal officers were detained in their homes or found dead in car accidents orchestrated to look like random acts of violence. Colonel Keita's team moved with clinical precision, bypassing checkpoints through corrupt access codes, quietly neutralizing guards loyal to Traoré. But what they didn't know was that Traoré, anticipating such a coup, had prepared a parallel command structure. Deep within the city, a group of young officers known as the Red Falcons, trained personally by Traoré and fiercely loyal to him, activated under emergency protocol Echelon 12. A young commander named Nasser Diallo, no older than 28, received a silent SMS on a secure device hidden beneath the floorboards of a safe house. "Activate Shield of Sankara, begin Phase 1. Nasser's face tightened with purpose. Within 20 minutes, backup forces began moving not toward defense, but toward pre-marked interception points, ready to collapse the ambush. Elsewhere, the international media began receiving anonymous leaks from a shadowy account labeled Burkina Leaks, including documentation of the IMF secret deal to destabilize Traoré's government in exchange for future mining rights, and audio recordings of European ambassadors mocking African sovereignty during backroom negotiations. These files hit social media with thunderous impact. Hashtags like #HandsOffBurkina and #Traoré the People's Captain trended globally within hours. Inside the compound, Ibrahim was on the move. "We're not running," he told Salif. "We're walking into the storm." He emerged from the underground facility flanked by the Red Falcons, wearing no armor, only the Burkina flag across his shoulders, a pistol on his hip, and steel in his eyes. Colonel Keita, having breached the outer defenses, marched into the courtyard expecting to find a cowering captain ready to surrender. Instead, he was met by over 24 armed Red Falcons encircling the convoy, their rifles trained on every man. Keita's face went pale. "Captain Traoré," he barked, "you are under arrest for treason against the state." Ibrahim walked forward slowly, unshaken. "Treason?" he said softly. "No, Colonel. I committed a far worse crime in their eyes. He paused. I told the people the truth. Before Keita could respond, a massive explosion rocked the eastern flank of the compound. One of the Alpha 9 transport trucks had been rigged to detonate upon biometric scan, a failsafe planted by one of Traoré's own infiltrators weeks earlier. The convoy was thrown into chaos. Keita hit the ground, dazed. Traoré didn't flinch. Secure them, he ordered calmly. Red Falcons surged forward. Gunfire erupted. The arrest operation had become a battlefield. But this was just the beginning, because the real shock wasn't the failed arrest attempt, or the firefight, or even the international outcry building by the hour. No, the real shock came minutes later when Ibrahim Traoré, standing beside a bound and bloodied Colonel Keita, pulled out a document and held it up before the press cameras now streaming live across the globe. It was a signed confession from the Vice President of the Transitional Council, detailing how a consortium of international banks, aided by regional mercenaries, had conspired to topple Traoré in exchange for mineral control. The confession had been filmed days earlier in secret, after the Vice President had been quietly captured during a failed escape to Côte d'Ivoire. The silence on air was deafening. In that moment, Captain Ibrahim Traoré didn't just survive an arrest. He detonated a political bomb whose shockwaves would tear through the corridors of power across Africa and beyond. And yet, even then, none of them realized what he was planning next. As the smoke cleared and Colonel Keita was dragged away in shackles, the silent halls of Burkina Faso's Transitional Council exploded into chaos. Traoré's expose had not only shocked the citizens but ruptured the fragile alliances that kept the council's facade of unity intact. Within hours, resignation letters, forged flight manifests, and panicked phone calls to foreign embassies filled the upper ranks of the regime like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Meanwhile, Traoré, whose image was now being shared in murals across Accra, Dakar, Bamako, and even Johannesburg, found himself standing on a knife's edge between martyrdom and revolution. In the underground command bunker, General Bamba, his face tense with fatigue, slammed a classified dossier onto the table. Ibrahim, we've intercepted diplomatic cables between the French Intelligence Directorate and the ECOWAS command base in Abuja. They're mobilizing, not just sanctions this time, drones, mercenaries, special units. They're planning a precision intervention to restore democratic order. Ibrahim stared at the documents in silence for a moment before turning to Nasser Diallo, who had just entered, his uniform streaked with blood from the earlier clash. What about the people? Ibrahim asked. How are they responding? Nasser nodded. We've never seen anything like this. The protests have turned into mass mobilizations, spontaneous roadblocks, civilian militias forming, waving national flags. They say if anyone tries to touch you again, they'll have to walk over 1 million bodies to do it. Ibrahim's eyes narrowed. Good, but we're not going to wait to be attacked. We expose them before they can act. He turned to his intelligence chief, a sharp, reclusive woman named Ouakabor, once an elite French-trained analyst who defected to Traoré's cause after uncovering the West's deliberate destabilization plans for the Sahel. Owa, what do you have on Operation Goliath? Owa slid a flash drive across the table. Everything, names, locations, payment trails, mercenary recruitment in Mali, arms smuggled through Libya, encrypted messages between ECOWAS generals and French corporate executives. It's all here. Ibrahim nodded slowly. Good. Send it all to international media, African think tanks, civil society coalitions, and then send it to the streets. Let the people see it first. As the files went viral across social media, telegram channels, and hacked radio frequencies, the narrative shifted overnight. Burkina Faso was no longer painted as a rogue nation led by a power-hungry soldier. It was now the front line of a new African awakening, but as expected, the backlash was immediate. ECOWAS declared a state of emergency along the northern borders. France cut all diplomatic ties and froze the country's financial assets. UN delegates whispered about authorizing a peacekeeping intervention. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the capital, strange movements were detected. unmarked helicopters landing near a former NATO training base now rumored to be used by the CIA. That night, under the cover of darkness, Ibrahim met with leaders of the civilian resistance in a dimly lit warehouse. Among them were students, union organizers, women's rights activists, even former government whistleblowers who had once opposed him. He stood at the center of the circle, not as a commander, but as a listener. "I didn't take this role to be your ruler," he began. "I stood up because no one else would, but now they come for all of us. If I fall, they will not stop with me. They will dismantle every movement, every dream we've dared to chase. I need you not behind me, but beside me." An old man, a retired professor with trembling hands, stepped forward. "Captain, you're wrong about one thing. You didn't just stand up when no one else would. You reminded us we could too." The room erupted in quiet applause and nods of agreement. Plans were drawn, safe zones organized. Civilian defense lines formed. Universities began broadcasting educational seminars on sovereignty, history, and foreign manipulation, teaching a new generation how to resist, not just with weapons, but with knowledge. But far from the capital, a different kind of meeting was underway. Inside a secure ECOWAS command center in Abuja, generals from several West African nations, alongside shadowy Western advisors, reviewed drone footage and intelligence reports. "Traoré has to be neutralized," said General Yemi Adwale of Nigeria. "He's becoming a contagion. If his ideology spreads, we lose the entire region." A thin, pale man in a dark suit, clearly not African, leaned forward. "No more arrests, no more trials. Kill him, make it look like internal sabotage. Let the world believe his own people turned on him." The room fell silent, but not in disagreement. The plan was simple: infiltrate Traoré's inner circle using a double agent, sabotage the communications hub, and strike during an orchestrated false flag attack to blame it on rebel factions. Back in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim began noticing strange tensions. Security drills were interrupted. 2 loyal officers disappeared. A transmission center reported a power surge that wiped out 72 hours of encrypted data. Something was wrong. Late one night, General Bamba stormed into his quarters. "We have a mole," he hissed, "someone close." We traced an encrypted satellite call from inside HQ. The signal went dark after reaching Lagos. Ibrahim stood slowly. "Then we bring everyone in, interrogate them, privately, quietly." Over the next 48 hours, every top officer, advisor, and even Ouagadougou herself were subjected to intense internal vetting. And then, they found him. Lieutenant Karim Ouedraogo, a promising young communications officer who had once saved Nasser's life in the field, broke down under questioning. He'd been blackmailed, his sister kidnapped by foreign operatives, his compliance ensured through threats and digital surveillance, but his confession came too late. The trap had already been set. That evening, as Traoré prepared to address the nation in a live broadcast, the command center was hit by a coordinated explosion, set off by a time-delayed device hidden in an oxygen vent. The explosion was meant to kill everyone inside. Walls crumbled, smoke engulfed the corridors, screams pierced the air. Traoré, who had stepped outside just minutes before the detonation to take a phone call, was thrown to the ground by the shockwave but survived. Bloodied and dazed, he pulled himself up amidst chaos, his ears ringing, his vision blurry. Beside him, Nasser staggered forward, dragging 2 injured guards. "It was them," he growled, "the ECOWAS cell, they almost got you." But the attack had failed, and the shocking moment that followed stunned the world. Traoré, covered in ash and blood, walked barefoot into the ruins of the compound, climbed onto the collapsed remains of the stage, and addressed the nation live using an emergency broadcast unit patched by civilian tech volunteers. "They tried to kill me tonight," he began, his voice raspy but defiant. "Not because I committed a crime, but because I refused to sell this country to outsiders, because I told you the truth." And then, lifting his shirt, he revealed the bruises and cuts along his body. "This is the price they want us all to pay for freedom, but I'm still here and I'm not leaving." The crowd that gathered outside the ruins swelled into thousands, then tens of thousands. As they chanted his name and waved torches into the night sky, a military satellite captured something the West had not anticipated. The people were no longer afraid. The next morning, something even more shocking happened. Mali and Guinea, long criticized for their own military-led transitions, announced a regional alliance with Burkina Faso, vowing to defend the sovereignty and dignity of African nations against foreign interference. The African Union was forced to call an emergency session, and somewhere in a dark embassy office in Paris, a trembling hand picked up a phone and whispered, "We underestimated him," but it was already too late. The sun rose over Ouagadougou with an eerie calm, casting long golden rays through the smoke-stained skyline. A city still trembling from the previous night's assassination attempt was now wide awake, alert, defiant, and transformed. Crowds filled the streets, some chanting Traoré's name, others painting murals of his bloodied face against slogans like "Africa stands" and "Our captain, our voice." Makeshift barricades were raised by civilians alongside soldiers, not to block each other, but to protect the streets from external intrusion. In a small room below the destroyed command compound, Ibrahim Traoré sat across from a circle of key advisors, General Bamba Awakebor, Nasser Diallo, and representatives from Mali and Guinea who had arrived overnight in an unmarked diplomatic convoy. The faces were tired, scarred, but lit with fire. "This is no longer just about Burkina Faso," said Awa, placing a satellite photo on the table showing ECOWAS troops amassing near the Benin border. "They're preparing a full ground assault within 72 hours. The order is already signed. They'll say it's to restore order and secure foreign nationals, but their objective is clear: move you, eliminate resistance, and reopen the mining corridors to Western corporations." Ibrahim leaned back, his voice calm. "Then we don't just defend, we expose. We dismantle their lies before they fire the first shot." General Bamba nodded. "We've already uploaded the intercepted ECOWAS communications to secure cloud nodes. Our friends in Senegal, Niger, and Chad are watching closely. If we make this publicly public, some of them might hesitate to support the invasion." Ibrahim looked at the envoy from Mali, Colonel Maurice Sissoko. "Will you stand with us openly?" Maurice's jaw tightened. "We didn't cross the desert last night to have tea. If they invade one of us, they invade all of us. It's time someone taught them that West Africa is not a chessboard." Over the next 24 hours, a torrent of strategic maneuvers unfolded. The Red Falcons, now expanded into a full underground militia network, activated encrypted relay stations across the Sahel. Civilian journalists began broadcasting from mobile studios hidden in schools and churches. Traoré's team coordinated with African digital activists to flood global feeds with evidence of ECOWAS and French collusion. Emails showing millions paid to mercenary contractors, voice recordings of diplomats mocking African voters, and satellite footage of illegal military buildups camouflaged as humanitarian aid. Even Al Jazeera and Deutsche Welle began cautiously reporting the story, cracking the wall of silence that had shielded Western interests. But Traoré knew information alone wouldn't be enough. They had to take control of the symbolic narrative to make this not just a political moment, but a historical turning point. So he made a decision that stunned even his inner circle. He would travel in person to Accra, ECOWAS headquarters, and speak directly at the emergency summit, uninvited. "They expect a hiding captain," he said. "I'll give them a walking revolution." Against every security protocol, Traoré boarded a disguised medical transport jet with a skeleton crew, bypassing standard air routes and radar detection with the help of sympathetic technicians in Togo. Word leaked within hours. By the time he landed in Accra, thousands had gathered at Kotoka International Airport. Some wept, some sang, but all made way as he stepped out, dressed in a simple olive uniform with no military insignia, only the Pan-African star on his chest. The ECOWAS summit was already in session, chaos swirling as factions debated whether to proceed with the military operation. The Nigerian and Ivorian delegations were firm on intervention. Others, Liberia, Sierra Leone, Senegal, expressed discomfort with the optics. When Traoré walked into the chamber unannounced, security panicked. Cameras turned, diplomats froze. "You're not permitted to speak here," barked a senior ECOWAS secretary. "You are under international suspension and subject to arrest." Ibrahim raised a hand. "Then arrest me," he said coolly. "Do it in front of the world." Silence. The room didn't move. Slowly, he walked to the podium, placing a worn USB stick on the table. "This contains every document your governments have tried to hide. Every payment, every secret deal, every dead civilian. But I didn't come here to blackmail you. I came to remind you of who we are." He looked around the room, his voice steady but passionate. "Africa is not your inheritance to trade. It is not the playground of banks. We do not belong to Paris, Washington, Beijing, or even this very council if it loses its soul. We belong to the people, and they are awake." Murmurs filled the chamber. Some shook their heads, but others, younger delegates especially, looked moved. For a moment, a crack appeared in the elite wall of indifference. Then came the twist. As Traoré exited the building surrounded by both protesters and security, a man lunged from the crowd with a knife, aimed directly at his chest. The crowd screamed, cameras snapped. The man was caught mid-strike by one of the Red Falcons, who tackled him to the ground. Blood sprayed Traoré was slashed along the arm, but alive. The attacker screamed in a dialect from northern Ghana, his face not local, his training evident. Interrogation later revealed he had been paid in cryptocurrency by a foreign intelligence agent posing as a contractor from the EU development arm. The attempt backfired spectacularly. Within hours, leaders from Mali, Guinea, and Niger signed the Accra Declaration, forming the Sovereign Sahel Alliance, a coalition vowing mutual defense, debt rejection, and complete resource nationalization. Social media lit up. The term Afri-Spring trended globally. UN delegates panicked. The French foreign minister resigned under pressure. Even the African Union, long dormant, called for emergency reforms. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, as Traoré returned with his arm bandaged but his resolve unbroken, a courier delivered a simple envelope, no name. Inside was a single photo, a NATO military badge beside a stack of West African CFA francs, and a list of African names, including his own, marked for neutralization. He stared at it for a long time, his face unreadable. "They've gone from denial," he said quietly, to desperation. General Bamba stepped forward. "What do we do?" Ibrahim Traoré, now more than a man, now a symbol, looked out across the capital from the palace ruins. "We finish what we started," he said, "and we prepare for the final move." The last phase was about to begin, and no one, not even his most loyal allies, could predict what Traoré was planning next. The air in Ouagadougou was electric, buzzing with anticipation, adrenaline, and a whisper of destiny. 3 weeks after the attempted arrest and assassination of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, Burkina Faso had become ground zero for what global analysts now called Africa's irreversible pivot. Across West Africa, government strongholds trembled as the Sovereign Sahel Alliance, Burkina Faso, Mali, Guinea, and now Niger, declared a permanent military, economic, and ideological union, one based on Pan-African principles, complete resource sovereignty, and zero foreign debt dependence. But inside the makeshift war room deep beneath the presidential ruins, Traoré stared not at celebration, but at the final phase of his plan, marked in red on the wall, Operation Exodus. "We've destabilized their narrative, we've exposed their operations, but now we strike at the system itself," he said, pointing at a map covered in overlapping rings across Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. The central bank of West African states, the CFA franc, the old colonial infrastructure that still lets them control us without soldiers. General Bamba, now scarred and limping from the drone attack he barely survived, leaned forward. "We shut down the CFA." Ibrahim nodded. "We do more. We create a new currency, blockchain, backed, Pan-African owned, decentralized, and validated by our own commodities. Gold, lithium, cobalt. We take our wealth digital and cut their leash for good." Ouagadougou looked skeptical. "If we announce that now, the retaliation will be nuclear." figuratively or literally, Paris, Brussels, Washington, they'll do everything to crash our system. Sanctions, cyber warfare, maybe even internal civil wars. Ibrahim didn't blink. Then, we give them something bigger to fear, something they can't control. In a moment that would later be declassified, Traoré revealed to his inner circle what he had been secretly building for over 2 years, Project Sankara Net, a covert alliance of African coders, dissidents, engineers, and rogue economists from over 12 nations, working underground to build continent's first sovereign digital infrastructure, independent satellites, encrypted networks, AI-based social monitoring tools, and a universal identity ledger stored entirely on African-owned servers. The West thinks we're farmers with guns, Ibrahim said, but we've built a nation in the shadows of their arrogance. That night, as most of the world slept, the Sovereign Sahel Alliance went live with Pan-Africanism, a decentralized digital currency backed by physical reserves stored in undisclosed mines and warehouses across Mali and Burkina Faso. Within 24 hours, millions of citizens downloaded the wallet app, traded CFA for Pan-Africanism, and began local transactions. The World Bank issued a formal condemnation. France froze remaining Sahel assets. But the African people didn't flinch. In Kenya, students held a Traoré night to celebrate the dawn of Pan-Africanism. In Ethiopia, a rogue faction within parliament proposed breaking from the African Union's economic alignment to join the alliance. Meanwhile, chaos gripped global markets. Swiss banks reported withdrawals from West African accounts in the billions, cash now considered politically radioactive. The U.S. State Department warned of severe diplomatic consequences. In Paris, protests erupted, with activists chanting "Decolonize now" and waving posters of Traoré next to Che Guevara. But just when Traoré's team believed they had taken the final blow, claimed the wealth, destroyed the narrative, ignited the minds, an emergency encrypted call came through from a double agent in Geneva. What he said chilled the room. They're planning a decapitation strike, multi-nation operation, CIA, DGSC, MI6. They want to frame it as an internal schism, a Red Falcon coup. The window is tight. They're targeting your next public speech. Place de la Dignite. There's a sniper team en route, backed by drone surveillance. And they're not stopping with you. Silence fell. Nasser clenched his fists. We cancel the speech, he said, but Traoré shook his head. No, we double it. Invite the people, all of them. Awaz's eyes went wide. Are you mad? That's suicide. You'll be killed on air, and they'll pin it on one of your own. Traoré stood unshaken, or they'll try, and the world will see them fail. He turned to General Bamba, ready Operation Mirror. The morning of the speech was unlike anything ever seen in Ouagadougou. Over 1 million people flooded Place de la Dignite, stretching as far as the eyes could see, armed not with weapons but with their presence. Families, farmers, engineers, schoolchildren, elders, they wore red. They chanted. They stood as a human wall, a living shield. Hidden among the rooftops and minarets, elite Red Falcon snipers took their positions, not to kill, but to observe, to catch the assassin before he struck. In a secret chamber beneath the stage, Awa monitored the satellite feed from a hacked U.S. drone. Target acquired. North Tower, window 3, adjusting lens now. She froze. It's not one man, it's a team of 3, and they're about to. A bullet tore through the air. Time slowed. Traoré, standing at the podium, saw it coming. Not with his eyes, but with instinct. He didn't duck. He stepped forward. The bullet struck a Red Falcon soldier who leapt in front of him. Another gunshot. Missed. The crowd screamed, chaos, but then another figure emerged from the tower, an older man, Senegalese, Traoré's former mentor from his training days. He stepped between the sniper and the window, holding a tablet. He had footage, proof. The shooter hesitated. It was too late. A Red Falcon team stormed the building and broadcast the sniper's confession live via hacked satellite. We were hired by external agents, British, American, French. Our orders were clear. Kill him. Make it look like betrayal. The crowd heard it all. Around the world, silence followed. Traoré stepped back to the microphone, barely alive, blood on his coat. You have seen who they are. Now show them who we are. The people roared, not with anger, but with unity. Footage went viral instantly. A global outcry erupted. Young African diaspora in London, New York, Paris flooded streets in solidarity, journalists in Europe demanded resignations, African presidents once loyal to the West began quietly switching sides. But the biggest twist came 2 days later. At a UN Security Council session, the Russian and Chinese ambassadors refused to condemn the Sahel alliance. Instead, they called for a new African security order, led by the alliance themselves. The US ambassador walked out. France demanded emergency sanctions, but the wave had turned. Burkina Faso signed a joint infrastructure deal with South Africa and Tanzania. Algeria pledged fuel and defense equipment. And most shockingly, Ethiopia and Egypt jointly recognized Pan-Afri as a regional reserve currency. Traoré, his arm in a sling, stood on the tarmac as a new fleet of Burkina Faso's own military drones took flight, built by Sahel engineers, funded by mineral wealth, guided by the people. Nasser turned to him, "You did it." Ibrahim didn't smile, "We started it." Awad joined them, holding a thick folder labeled Phase Omega. "What now?" Ibrahim took the folder, scanned the horizon, and replied, "Now we teach them what freedom really looks like." And with that, Captain Ibrahim Traoré walked away from the wreckage of the old world, not as a rebel, not as a soldier, but as a symbol no bullet could kill. Behind him, an entire continent began to rise.